We are live. We are live. Welcome to College Football's Peek Around the Corner with your host, Greg Flugar. We cover everything in college football because we love everything in college football. And if you do as well, please subscribe to our channel. Smash the like button if you like our content. Share the video with your family and your friends. If you want to support this Rebel Outpost, if you want to support the home, the true home for the college football sickos with a donation to help us keep the lights on, hit that $sign where you make your comments, and I'll get to you super chat as quick as I possibly can. Welcome on, everybody. Welcome into the studio that sits on the corner, the very corner of Keith Jackson Parkway and Kurt Gowdy Avenue. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid to become a legend with your comments and with your phone calls. July 1st, congratulations to the Delaware Fighting Blue Hens. Congratulations to the Missouri State Bears. First day as FBS football programs. Congratulations. Congratulations. The Fighting Blue Hens and the Bears of Missouri State. Today, under the spotlight, the PATC spotlight, we are going to put the reigning, defending, undisputed Big 12 champions, the Arizona State Sun Devils, We're going to put them under the hot spotlight that PATC provides as we continue our spotlight series, going from one team to the next every single day, all the way up until the start, until August 23rd. So we're having a lot of fun with that. We're breaking everything down. We're breaking down all the tapes, trying to give you the best information here at College Football Peek Around the Corner. There's breaking news earlier this morning. Bubba Cunningham, he's got a little bit more time left as the athletic director, and then he's going to be elevated into a senior advisory position. And North Carolina has named the successor for Bubba Cunningham. And that successor is going to report directly to Bubba Cunningham. Historically, when you're talking about realignment, a university that may change their conference affiliation in the near future, you don't really, at least you don't too much, not historically, focus on a new athletic director hire of that said university. The president? Yes. The athletic director? Not so much. So we may have to be a little bit careful about not reading too much into who and why they've named their successor and who they focused on. But there is, I think it's fair to say the SEC warm winds continue to blow on through Chapel Hill. We first started talking about the battle at UNC a couple of months before Kevin Gusowich left the chancellorship at UNC. Because we gave you guys the peek around the corner through the North Carolina money perch. We told you there was a rock fight happening at North Carolina. We also had the benefit of, I have a family member, a nephew who was a professor at North Carolina. Now he's a professor Gothenburg, Sweden, whatever that name is. Gothenburg. He's in Sweden. He's up there in Sweden. So he was able to fill me in on a few things as well. But so when Kevin Gusowich left the Michigan State, that was a huge sign. North Carolina Money Perch kept telling us information. It's leaning SEC. And we know that North Carolina, there's nobody who's told us differently. Not a one person. Not a one person that has told us differently. North Carolina is the number one target for the SEC expansion plans. Their presidents want North Carolina. So, in that context, in that background, now you look at this new athletic director hire. Man, it is very, very, very difficult. It's very difficult not to see SEC all over this. The athletic director, the new one that is coming on in, and we'll go through some of the reports here. Um, he grew up in Chapel Hill. He has spent his time in the southeastern part of the United States. He's a UVA graduate. He worked at a law firm that worked directly in sports and entertainment, that worked directly with Conference USA, the NCAA, and the Southeastern Conference. He's being brought in to create, establish new revenue streams, new sponsorship. He's been brought in to make sure that North Carolina is getting everything out of their brand in the southeastern part of the United States. He's worked with NASCAR racing team. I mean, I don't think it takes a genius to understand why he would be considered a very good candidate to become the new athletic director if you're looking at North Carolina's future in a particular manner, which is becoming the 17th SEC member. So we're going to go through all that. We're going to go through the Arizona State spotlight, and we'll talk about other news that is going on in college football. Still Austin is in the house. Bruce Harris is in the house. Jose, Don Scruggs, Jake, Go Blue. Rock and Rant, the summer winds keep marching in like across the sea. I might have to do that, Frank Sinatra. I might have to do that, ladies and gentlemen. I might have to pull that one off. Mr. Monkey says, Bobby Hansen. Where we got? Jeff Morgan is in the house. Karan Shakar, can we please get a warning before the opening PATC rendition this time? The answer to that is no! Go Huskies is in the house. Go Huskies, my prof. L. Woody, Bob Swinger, Richard L., the Georgia Bulldog. Don Scruggs, Sean is in the house. Daniel Gygax is here. John Dry, Go Texas Tech, Richard L. Warm winds equal hot air. Friends call me Sean is in the house. The almighty Finn. Who else? Ryan Thomas is in the house. Virginia's Board of Visitors are also willing to part from Virginia Tech. We're going to have to keep an eye, again. We're going to have to keep an eye on all these different types of political developments or possible political developments. Now, I've been read the Riot Act. I have been read the Riot Act by some of those former PATC family members who got upset with me and now whatever, because I bring up politics when it comes to realignment. Politics is going to be involved in this next wave of realignment. It is. It already is. And it's going to continue. So I got to talk about it. This show, I'm not saying, this show, we cover everything. We cover you've got to make sure you are not stuck in your own silo of information. You got to keep your head on a swivel. You got to have curiosity, or this show is not for you. And that's my loss, not your loss. There's a whole bunch of college football YouTube channels are going to tell you what you want to hear, or they're just going to focus on one aspect. We can't do that here. We're not going to do that here. If you are paying attention, I continue to say the door is not completely shut on this. The door is not completely shut on that, because the truth of the matter is there are no doors that are shut right now. Things are fluid, and there's too many variables. One of those variables is politics. One of those variables is politics. But you got to keep up your curiosity. I mean, right now, in July 1st, 2025, it is very easy to consume the information that USC is in the Big Ten. But when we broke the news on March 31st of 2022 that USC and the Big Ten were in talks, it was going to happen. These are all the reasons why people thought we were nuts, because it never happened before. The Big Ten hadn't gone all the way. They hadn't brought in a school that wasn't contiguous in the contiguous state, and a whole bunch of reasons. They would not stab their sister conference in the back, and you got to keep out of your silo. You got to be willing to take new information in. All the way up until the end. No doors are closed. Now, again, I thought it was, I'm going all over the place here a little bit, but I thought it was essential that I just put out a prediction to give you guys what I believe where this is going to end up. When I put out that prediction on April 9th, go back to our April 9th live show if you missed it, I said the chances of myself being correct on this, everything being correct, is about 1%. But I thought it was needed, because I think everybody wanted to see where I thought generally where this was heading. And on April 9th, I said North Carolina and Virginia to the SEC. At that time, and I still believe the same thing. I believe when the SEC expands, it's going to be transformational, just like when they took Oklahoma and Texas. I don't think the SEC expands unless it's transformational again. And while North Carolina and Virginia does some very good things for the SEC, I don't think that's going to be enough. And I don't think the SEC is going to allow the Big Ten to grab a big beachhead in the state of Florida by taking the Miami and Florida State blend. So that is why I think the SEC is going to get Virginia, North Carolina, Florida State, and Clemson. I think they're going to do the big scoop. And the chances of me being right on that are about 10%. Just that part alone. And then I think at that point Notre Dame has to make the decision to join the Big Ten. And then they take Miami with them, and then we'll take it from there. But the chances of me being correct, I've said it, I've been out in the open. This is not the Colorado story. This is not the USC story. This is not This is not Arizona State, Utah, which we nailed all those stories. This is so much more complicated. And one of those complications, but not the only one of those complications is politics. So we got to keep an eye on it. You know, there is a lot of connectivity between Virginia and North Carolina. And I'm saying a lot. And so I think that's going to bring Virginia to the SEC. But I am open to the argument. I think everybody's open to the argument. What exactly is the Board of Governors of North Carolina going to do? Because we're going to go through an article here of Brian Murphy, WRAL. The Bubba Cunningham being elevated to the senior advisory position and the successor coming on in. All those moves at Chapel Hill had to be approved by the Board of Governors, not the Board of Regents at Chapel Hill. They've been taken out of the sports world. So the Board of Governors is the ultimate power. Peter Hands, the North Carolina president of the system, board, whatever they're calling it, he has the ultimate power. So that ultimate power may or may not, we'll see what they do with North Carolina in this storyline. Ryan Thomas brings up the University of Virginia Board of Visitors. Today, there is a change, a sea change. 4 new people come on in and take their seats of a 17 member. We talked about that on a live show a couple days ago. It seems like 2 months. I mean, wow, we have gone over so much information at Peek Around the Corner. Holy smokes, we are covering everything. It is daunting. Every day it is daunting. But there are 4 new members. And go ahead, read the background of those 4 new members. Go for it. I gave you the names of them. You can Google it. You tell me where those 4 individuals, where their interest lies when it comes to the future of Virginia. I almost said North Carolina, of Virginia. The SEC is doing in Virginia what they did at North Carolina a couple of years ago. And there is a window of time for the SEC, the interest, those who hold the interest of the SEC to push the ignition switch. And I think it's within the next 18 months. And then after that, they're gambling. After that, the Southeastern Conference is gambling. For those Big Ten folk out there, we, Big Ten folk, have had a lot of discussions over the last 15 years about North Carolina. Most of those discussions had to do with North Carolina eventually joining the Big Ten Conference. Most Big Ten folk thought North Carolina of a Big Ten university. So did I. Jim Delaney fancied North Carolina. Big Ten targeted North Carolina in 2010. There's a lot of reasons why North Carolina academically and research-wise would go to the Big Ten. But since all that, the SEC has added Missouri, Texas A&M, Texas. The SEC's own conference has gone way up in research. And now North Carolina and Virginia, the warm winds of the Southeastern Conference have come on in. There is little doubt, there is no doubt, that the Southeastern Conference, when the timing is right for everybody involved, and I don't think the timing is now, that they're going to go, they're going to have their people in position, they're going to be able to politically, inside of UNC, inside of Virginia, to pull the switch. They may not have this opportunity again, but they're going to have an opportunity within the next 18 months. The Board of Visitors is just one part of it. Don Scruggs is here. MBM is here. Jose, Movie Time Blues, Amazing Blue, Tumasta is in the house. George Holton, Osceola the Trucker is here. Nick Boardman is here. I understand that. Virginia Tech is better than in sports in Virginia. I completely understand. Bobby Hansen is in the house. I don't think you should be convinced. Bobby Hansen. We got to watch that play out. We got to keep our head on a swivel. Ryan Willie is here. The evil Badger, Ryan Willie. Go Black 45 is here. Cranky Taga is here. Olarmy is in the house. Who else? Healing, Florida. Friends call me Sean. Rod Nix. Sooner Cowboys. Ryan Willie. With the likelihood of UNC and UVA going to the SEC, how soon does the Big Ten strike? I don't think they strike anytime soon. Ryan Willie. I could be wrong. I got to make sure I don't get sucked down in my own silo of information. Of historical norms would tell us that the biggest domino piece has to fall first before we can figure out the rest. North Carolina is the biggest domino piece if you take out Notre Dame. I happen to believe, and maybe my belief will change, but I happen to believe that the Big Ten will not give up on North Carolina and that they won't strike until the SEC, until North Carolina piece is figured out. Now, it could come to that point in the road where North Carolina, all people are picking up, it looks like it's going to be North Carolina to the SEC. That is going to have a lot, even before it becomes official, that is going to be very impactful on Notre Dame. I do not think the Big Ten is going to do anything until it's about North Carolina or Notre Dame. I've said that since June 15th. And I'm sticking with that for now because I don't have any reason to change. But I don't think the Big Ten is going to give up on North Carolina. But they're not the chalk. The Big Ten is not the chalk. James Davis is in the house. Bobby Hansen. Greg, the Big Ten wasn't going to leave USC on an island. What makes you think they will do that to Miami? Who said I think they're going to leave Miami on an island? I don't think Miami, if the Miami goes to the Big Ten, I don't think Miami will end up as the only Southeastern university in the Big Ten. Now, in a way, Miami's on an island anyways. Miami has to take a plane to every place they go to when they play football. They take a plane to Florida State. So, but anyways, I understand what you're saying, but I don't think Miami is. In other words, my prediction goes 6 teams out, but there's going to be more activity after that. I don't think Miami will be on an island. John Till, if the SEC takes 4 teams that you just named, does that mean Miami, Georgia Tech, Stanford, Notre Dame goes to the Big Ten? It could. I'm not willing to go that far. Again, this was a prediction that I made on April 9th because people were desperately they wanted to know where I think things stood. But I also said I think I only have a 1% chance of getting it right because there's way too many variables up ahead. And we've already seen some of those are in action since that April 9th prediction. I mean, again, I cannot foresee the Southeastern Conference taking North Carolina and Virginia, which their presidents want. I cannot see the Southeastern Conference doing that and giving an opportunity for the Big Ten to then go ahead and take Miami and Florida State. That's just me. It's not just me. I've had discussions with other people about I don't think that's going to happen. But I could be dead wrong. But can you imagine? I do not. The Florida State-Miami blend to the Big Ten would be just too damn valuable to the Big Ten. And I don't think the SEC is going to allow that to happen. Now, the Big Ten folk will say, great. The almighty Big Ten, we can strike first. Yeah. But the Big Ten hasn't, as far as I know, hasn't given up on North Carolina. And they don't want to step on Notre Dame's toes. The Big Ten is still courting the Big Ten is still courting Notre Dame. So, anyways, where are we? We almost done. Jimmy Austin is in the house. Scorched Legion Corps is here. Edward the Auburn Tiger, let's go. Tear on the high seas, go ECU Pirates. D5 Terps is shaking his head. He's shaking his head. Okay, let's go here. Let's start. Sam Leavitt, Arizona State, the reigning, defending, undisputed Big 12 champions. In our way too early prediction here at Peek Around the Corner, we've got Arizona State winning the Big 12 championship, defending it successfully. I think they are going to be the cream of the crop once again. You know, they're returning about 9 of their starters on defense. 9. I've got them as the number 4 seed. Now, I'm going to have to change this around because this was based on not straight seeding. So the seeding is going to change. But I'm going to have Arizona State pretty high. Arizona State, Big 12 champions, way too early predictions. Sam Leavitt, 2,800, almost 2,900 yards passing. 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions last year. 61.7% completion. 150.2 quarterback rating, which is sky high. Sam Levitt's got the legs, 443 yards rushing. There was an article out today about Sam Levitt. We're not going to go through it today, but his mother was a big part of the article, talking about how competitive Sam Levitt is, how competitive his father was. He was a football player. Sam Levitt's mother was a really good athlete. Sam Levitt's older brother was in the NFL, and he started the whole thing as a walk-on in college. Sam Levitt has list of names, like a hit list. Not really a hit list, but a list of guys. Like, now he's got a list of names that are all quarterbacks in college that were all regarded better than Sam Levitt. Sam Levitt did not get recruited like he believed he should have been recruited. So Sam Levitt's got like a chip on one shoulder, a chip on the other shoulder. Highly, highly skillful guy, highly competitive, and he is one of my top 6 in the Heisman Watch, PATC Heisman Watch. Klubnik, Nussmeier, Levitt, Manning, Smith, Jeremiah Smith, and Jeremiah Love. Those are the top 6 in my opinion. Sam Levitt, best quarterback in the Big 12. Best quarterback in the Big 12. Now, Raleek Brown, running back of Arizona State. Antoine Johnson, Sun Devil PATC member, is in the house. He says it's too hot in Tempe for Greg the Gold Curse to work on Arizona State. Well, good news for you, Antoine Johnson. Even if it's a cool football season at Tempe, Greg the Cold no longer exists. This year, it's Greg the Gold. Greg the Gold. Raleek Brown, he hasn't played much the last 2 seasons. He's been injured. He's a running back 2 years when he was a freshman. 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, actually. True freshman, USC. He ran for 227 yards, 5.4 yards per average rush, 3 rushing touchdowns, 16 receptions out of the backfield. As a freshman, USC. He went in the portal, and he's basically been nicked up ever since. So, he's a wild card. He is an absolute wild card. Raleek Brown. Going into 2025. But remember the name. Keep an eye on it. Kanye Udo. I guess you can say he's the other wild card. Kanye Udo, the great running back from Army, transfers and goes to Arizona State as they try to replace the great Cam Scatterbo. Kanye Udo goes for over 1,100 yards at Army, over 6 yards per rush, 10 rushing touchdowns, 1 reception. I remember watching an interview. Kanye Udo had an interview, and it was asked, why did you select Arizona State? And Udo said, because of the coaching. He really got connected to the coaching staff, to Dillingham and the entire coaching staff. So Kanye Udo, is he going to be RB1? Is he going to be the guy who carries the rock for Arizona State? Probably. Most likely. Most likely, Kanye Udo is going to be the cowbell, and Raleek Brown is going to be the scat back, the third down back. It could be a dynamic duo. It could be a dynamic duo. Kyson Brown, I'm not going to talk about Kyson Brown today. I know he is listed as RB number 1. He's the junior. But I want to talk about the transfer Kanye Udo and the scatback Raleigh Brown. But yes, Kyson Brown will also, there'll probably be a triple header in the backfield at Arizona State. And of course, the superstar, Jordan Tyson, great wide receiver. He got injured. He could not finish it out. He could not be in the playoffs, but the Arizona State Sun Devils lost by an eyelash to the Longhorns. Could you imagine if Sam Levitt was running around in that game and he had Jordan Tyson to throw to, but he did not. Tyson is coming back. The superstar, 75 receptions, over 1,100 yards receiving, 4.7 yards per rush, 10 receiving touchdowns. So Arizona State's got some guys. Jordan Tyson. They got Malik McClain. You got Kyson Brown, Raleigh Brown, running backs with Kanye Udo, Sam Levitt, the straw that is stirring the drink. And they've got 9 starters coming back from a defense that finish at the top of the Big 12. Now, I went with Xavier Alford because he's the vocal guy. He's the guy who is the most talkative in the Arizona State defense. 27 solo tackles, 31 combination tackles, 3 interceptions, 3 pass defenses. Arizona State loaded for 2025. Dillingham has got the Sun Devils on a roll. They start off Northern Arizona, and then they got that road trip, Mississippi State. Now, Arizona State defeated Mississippi State last year, I do believe. I think they beat Mississippi State on a last drive. I have that in my memory. Let me know if I'm wrong, anybody in the chat. But they play Mississippi State at Mississippi State on September 6th. Then they got that Texas State game again. They played last year. Arizona State won that game. Baylor, TCU, at Utah, Texas State, Houston, at Iowa State, West Virginia, at Colorado, home against Arizona. Arizona State, I believe, is going to successfully defend their Big 12 championship led by this man, Sam Levitt. I believe he is one of the top 6 in the Heisman watch right now. Put down your comments and thoughts in the comments section below the video. You are right. Arizona State jumped out to a big lead. They held on to win. Now you got to go on the road at Mississippi State. By the way, the Minnesota Golden Gophers start a 2-year series with Mississippi State next year and the year after that. Minnesota will be playing at Mississippi State in 2027. Okay. Again, we when this news broke, first of all, let me go to some super chats here. I'm very, very thankful for the generosity of everybody with their super chats, helping us keep the lights on here. Friends call me Sean. No reason the Big Ten couldn't cloak and dagger Miami and Florida State. I know that is a big, big question out there. Why don't the Big Ten just do that? Why don't they do that? I don't think they will. I don't think that the Big Ten is going to act first unless they get North Carolina or Notre Dame. we've been really consistent since last June 15th, because that's what we were told. And nothing has changed. But I can understand people believing that is a possibility. And maybe it is going to be a possibility. Maybe it's going to be so certain that the Big Ten cannot grab North Carolina that they just go ahead and take Florida State and Miami. But I will say this. I might get friends call me Sean upset. I might get everybody upset. But whatever the Big Ten does, they're going to check. Of course, the presidents have to sign on. We're talking about the blend. The Florida State and Miami, I think that's a good blend. I think that gets through. Florida State and Miami. The network, the presidents. But the Big Ten is going to, they're going to let somebody else know. And that somebody else is Notre Dame. Because the Big Ten really wants Notre Dame. You all know that. And so what I would advise Florida State and Miami is I would advise both universities to grow their relationship with Notre Dame. And I think they both know that. To give Florida State as much as a possibility, give it its best possibility to join the Big Ten. But again, I just don't think the SEC is going to allow this to happen. I do not think ESPN is going to allow this to happen. I think when the Southeastern Conference poaches, it's going to be more than 2 schools. I could be dead wrong. I could be. But I understand. I get it. Friends call me. I get it every day in DMs. Why don't Rick, the great legendary caller on PATC, why don't the Big Ten jump first and just take the 2 Florida schools? Right now, I have no indication that is what they're going to do. Because they're waiting on North Carolina, what happens to the Tar Heels, and then then to have that conversation with Notre Dame. Maybe the Big Ten's going to have to rethink it. I have said this over and over and over again. Florida State's relationship with Notre Dame is not all that good. Florida State may have some relationship issues with some Big Ten presidents, but maybe that has softened up a little bit. We know that Miami's got a little bit of an issue, Wisconsin and Miami. All that can be solved. That's why I keep saying doors are not closed to anything. But one of the relationships that Florida State doesn't have any problems with is Miami. And Miami doesn't have any relationship problems with Florida State. What I mean by that is those 2 universities, even though the fans go after each other, which is great, the public and the private schools in the state of Florida, they have a very good working relationship. And I think Miami completely understands the great value of that blend if it were to happen. And Florida State, of course, they'd be up for this if the SEC doesn't come a-knocking. But I get it, friends. Call me Sean. You represent the grand majority of the PATC family members when you ask that question. No reason. Big Ten should just cloak and dagger, come on in and get Miami and Florida before the North Carolina piece is settled. Thank you for the super chat. Friends, call me Sean. Helmer Hennison, would going to 9 games be enough to pay for North Carolina and UVA? Well, it's UNC and UVA. If they were to come into the SEC, they would be paid full, because the SEC and ESPN, they have a pro rata in their contract. Whoever they bring in, they're going to be paid full, unlike the Big Ten and Fox. Now, that doesn't mean that the SEC can bring on in anybody and ESPN's going to pay full. ESPN's going to have to acquiesce to this combination that the SEC presidents want. I happen to believe, and other people, chatter behind the curtain, believes, as of today, and we've talked about it, well, it's all in my April 9th prediction, that if the SEC is going to expand, you got to go to 9 conference games at that point. And now ESPN is going to be paying everybody more money for more conference games, and you're bringing on UNC and Virginia. I do not know how the SEC and ESPN doesn't take the two most valuable football brands that are not inside the SEC and the Big Ten right now. I do not know how the SEC does not take Florida State and Clemson along with Virginia and North Carolina. I do not see it. I could be wrong. I probably am wrong. I said that. But in my mind, and the people that I've talked with, it is how ESPN it has been reported that they're willing to pay for that 9th conference game. But are they going to be willing to pay for it? And then the additions are Virginia and North Carolina? You're adding 4.5 home games, you're adding 7 home games for Virginia, 7 home games for North Carolina, and it's going to be 9 conference home games every 2 years for Virginia, and the same for you're adding that. In my mind, you got to bring in Clemson and Florida State. In my mind, you've got to bring in Florida State and Clemson. Can you imagine? Maybe this will work. Maybe this is going to happen. But I would be just shocked. Can you imagine waking up on a day where there's breaking news that the SEC takes North Carolina, Virginia, and that's it, and then the Big Ten takes Miami and Florida State? I mean, we know that the SEC presidents want Virginia and North Carolina for a lot of good reasons. But I just can't see I cannot see ESPN allowing that to happen. But we're going to find out someday, aren't we? Right? Almighty Finn, hey, Greg cooking a burger with no cheese. Good for you, Almighty Finn. Good for you. Good for you, sir. The Edward, the Auburn Tiger, ESPN will not come up short. Clemson and Florida State are locks to the SEC. Nothing is a lock, Edward. Nothing is a lock. Even when I say this, I say I got a 1% chance of getting this right, and things are fluid because there's so many other variables in play. Maybe, just maybe, the SEC cannot pull the trigger in the next 18 months. and there is a sea change at North Carolina and Virginia because of politics, because of elections. Who knows? So many things can happen. Notre Dame, if Notre Dame calls the Big Ten tomorrow, just rip up everything I've said. Well, and that's D5 Terps. Carolina is the glue to that conference. Lose Carolina and the ACC loses its identity. Thank you for that. Thank you, D5 Terps, for that comment. And I'll say this. Even though we talk about it every day, even though we talk about it almost every day, the psychological blow to the ACC if North Carolina leaves the conference to the Southeastern Conference or to the Big Ten. But let's focus on the Southeastern Conference. If North Carolina and Virginia, or North Carolina State, I don't care. North Carolina, Duke, use whatever you want to use. North Carolina +1. We wake up tomorrow and they leave for the SEC. The psychological blow to the ACC it's going to be an earthquake. And I know they're not the most valuable brand. I get it. But the psychological blow for that to happen. And if you think that is not going to be a psychological blow to Notre Dame, I happen to think it's going to be. And I happen to think that's why the Big Ten it's North Carolina and Notre Dame for the Big Ten right now. And then we'll see where the dominoes fall when they decide where North Carolina goes. That's how we've been reading it. That's how we've been reading it for a very long time, and nothing has changed, in our opinion. Esmond talks. Don't think the Big Ten risks trying to get Florida State and have the Florida governor block and allow the SEC to counter. They will go for Miami and Georgia Tech if Notre Dame. Not possible. I cannot imagine the Florida governor blocking. I cannot imagine anybody blocking Florida State to get a P2, a Big Ten invite. I don't think that would happen. But for that to happen, there are going to be some Big Ten presidents that are going to have to overcome some of their distrust, right, of Florida politics as of right now when it comes to the public universities. The Florida Board of Governors stopped the University of Florida Gainesville from putting in a candidate for the university president that the Florida Gainesville own Board of Regents wanted, that they vetted, that they voted on. I mean, to have that type of overstep in a state government, wow. So again, lot of variables in this. A lot of variables. Thank you, Esmond Talks. I do appreciate it. And again, a lot of people would agree with you. Miami, Georgia Tech. Maybe that is something that the Big Ten should act on first. Do the first strike, Big Ten. Take Atlanta and Miami. Major markets, international markets. Anywhere around the country you can get to Atlanta and Miami, which you need in a national conference. Strike first. They'll come in at half share, and you're not gonna hurt your relationship with Notre Dame if you go with Miami and Georgia Tech first. But again, I think the Big Ten's going to wait on North Carolina. That's why I keep saying the door is not closed on the Big Ten for North Carolina. The door's not closed on Florida State to the Big Ten. The doors are not closed anywhere. They're just not, in my opinion, based on a lot of information. Things are fluid. Caleb Ramirez, when and if the SEC announces their additions, will the Big Ten announce it on the same day when it comes to realignment, or will it be staggered? A good question, and I would guess it's not going to be announced on the same day. Unless it's like, unless we're like August 15th of 2026, and suddenly we get news that Florida State has filed a notice of withdrawal, Miami has filed a notice of withdrawal, then it's all probably lined up and we're going to get all these announcements right after another. I don't know, Caleb. Great question. I don't know the answer. It could happen all the same day. Thank you so much for the super chat, Caleb. I do not have an answer. It could happen right away or maybe not. Thank you so much. Now let's get to I just want to go over the news real quick here. First of all, I'm gonna go to this last part. Hold on. We covered this earlier today in an episode 445. So if you wanna, you go check that episode out later on this evening if you haven't watched it. But Steve Newmark is the successor for Bubba Cunningham. So he'll be coming in a couple of years. He'll be the full-time athletic director of North Carolina, and he's going to be he is going to answer to Bubba Cunningham. And he's a native of Chapel Hill, okay? So Steve Newmark is a native of Chapel Hill with strong ties to the university. Newmark has served as president of RFK Racing for the past 15 years. In addition to running the operations for the professional sports team, Newmark also was part of a small group that spearheaded the creation of the charter system in NASCAR and has continued to serve as a liaison with NASCAR on behalf of all teams and all major initiatives in the sport over the past decade. Prior to joining RFK Racing, Newmark was a partner at the Charlotte-based law firm Robinson, Bradshaw and Hinson, where he specialized in sports and entertainment and worked extensively with the Southeastern Conference, Conference USA, and the NCAA. So before he went to NASCAR, he worked at a law firm and he worked extensively with the Southeastern Conference. Again, when you work at NASCAR, when you work at the job that he's done, revenue, sponsorship, business connections, all in the southeastern part of the United States. Before we get to your phone calls, I wanna show again. We're gonna quickly go through this. A lot of this is repeat, but I just want to go this real quick. North Carolina picks athletic director to replace Bubba Cunningham, who isn't leaving yet. Brian Murphy, Pat Welter, WRAL. North Carolina has hired a NASCAR team executive to be the school's next athletic director. So it's very difficult for anybody to deny. I mean, this guy, Newmark, he has been planted in the southeastern part of this country, working business sponsorships. This is what he does. This is their guy for a reason. And I don't think it's about a national conference in the Big Ten. But we shall see. Things can change. Cunningham has been in the athletic director role, since 2011. Steve Newmark, president of Roush Fenway Racing, will be the next athletic director. Newmark joins the department now as an executive associate athletic director with the focus on revenue related to football and men's and women's basketball. He would take over next summer. Now's the time, Cunningham says. It's really good time for me to say, hey, we've gotten here, let's hand it off to somebody else. Newmark is a Chapel Hill native, served on the advisory committee that led to the hiring of Bill Belichick. He's on the advisory group to select the next executive director of the Rams Club. He worked as a lawyer before the RFK racing, specialized in sports and entertainment, including work with the Southeastern Conference. Now, he doesn't have experience working for athletic department, brings in experience in sponsorships, marketing, team operations, contract negotiations from his work in NASCAR. That type of experience may be even more important in college athletics moving forward. I don't know, guys. I mean, I don't know if I could have come in here and written up a fake resume for the next athletic director in North Carolina and have it be more SEC than this guy. And this guy is not a fake. This is real. A quiet process. Chancellor Lee Roberts made the decision without a search committee. Well, Lee Roberts, the chancellor, made the decision with UNC system president Peter Hans. Again, back to the Board of Governors. The president of the Board of Governors. It's President Peter Hans. He's got to sign off on all this. Hans suspended some of the North Carolina Board of Trustees' authority over athletics. And then it talks about the new motto and everything. We don't have to go through that. Again, this Newmark guy, I mean, it's like, I'm not saying that he's going to go into the office first as an associate athletic director. I'm not saying he's walking in there with pens that read Southeastern Conference. I'm not saying that. But if you have socialized between Peter Hans, Lee Roberts, Bubba Cunningham, if you have socialized among those three that the future of North Carolina could very well possibly be the Southeastern Conference in the next 2 years, if you have actually socialized that among those three, this new athletic director, the successor to Bubba Cunningham, fits the profile perfectly. That's how I look at it. That is how I look at it. Okay, let's open up the phone lines here. We did the Spotlight, Arizona State Spotlight. You can talk about anything in college football that your heart desires. Sam Levitt going to be leading the Sun Devils, I believe, back to the Big 12 championship game. A beautiful season last year, and he did it without this guy at the very end, his superstar receiver, Jordan Tyson, but he's back. He's back. And then Kanye Udo, the transfer running back from Army. Going to be interesting to see what he does at Arizona State. Okay, we're going to open up the phone lines here. Talk about anything in college football that your heart desires. The phone lines are now open. 763 260 1333 763 260 1333. Give us a call. Give us a call. Talk about anything in college football that your heart desires. Marcus Meadows, thanks for coming on in. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. P. Lit is in the house. Thanks for coming on in.
Call from
Ryan Thomas.
Ryan Thomas, BYU Cougar. The floor is yours. How you doing, sir? Thanks for calling.
Doing good. Let me ask a series of questions here, Greg.
You got it.
The first question is it correct that in the Big Ten media contracts that there is a pro rata clause for 4 teams so long as Notre Dame is one of them?
I do not know that. I do not know that at all. I have not heard of that. It could be true, but I've not heard of that. I do know that the only thing I know about Notre Dame is that they're written in the contract and it would elevate everybody's payouts on their media money. I do not know how it would affect Washington and Oregon's payouts. But beyond that, I do not know.
That was mentioned when the deal was finalized. It was either McMurphy or someone or Thamel or someone.
If you could find that and send me a link,
I will find that. But absolutely, because the Big Ten was promised a pro rata for 4 schools so long as Notre Dame was one of them.
Okay, beautiful. Send that to me. I do not remember that. Thank you, sir.
So that implies that Notre Dame at least pays for 3 other schools, or a portion of it.
Yeah.
And we know that Washington and Oregon didn't get full freight. So yeah. I think Notre Dame is a real big key linchpin in the Big Ten because
yes, they are.
There's no way that they can get. There's no way the Big Ten could get UNC and UVA. To get them to pay market rate without people in the Big Ten having to take less money. I mean, it was already a difficult thing to get Washington and Oregon. People have to remember that.
Yep.
And there's no way that that's happening. And there's no way that if the networks, the networks may pay market value for Florida State, but there's no way that Washington and Oregon are going to be okay with making less than Florida State.
Yep, no question about it. Yes.
So, I mean, there are some real internal politics the Big Ten has to manage that I don't think people realize.
Mm-hmm.
And for them, Notre Dame makes a lot of problems get solved easily. I do think now whether they go to 22 or stay at 20, I don't know, but I will say this, that Notre Dame has a lot of history with Miami. They have a lot of history with Stanford. They have a lot of history with Georgia Tech.
Yep.
And there's no coincidence there. Miami and Georgia Tech, and that alone might entice Notre Dame to make the move. And Notre Dame's going to want to take Stanford along with them, and I'm sure that if Notre Dame will give up their independence, that Stanford would be willing to give up their Ivy League Plus consortium membership and join the Big Ten Academic Alliance. And I'm sure the Big Ten presidents would not worry about a bit of money of Stanford's athletic contribution whatsoever to the financial, because they're making so much more money elsewhere in the equation.
Yeah, so, that's why Stanford is in the Holy Smokes Theater, sitting in the same row with Duke and Georgia Tech, because, to be honest, you saw, Ryan Thomas, you and everybody else saw what Notre Dame did to get Stanford in the ACC, to make sure that they stayed at a Power 4 level. So.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that those are the realities that they have to face. Now, I don't know. That's the thing. I mean, if Notre Dame comes in, maybe the Big Ten has to really consider going to 24, and then at that point, who does Notre Dame want in the club? And I think that's a real discussion right there, and
It's
that's
always
why
been a discussion. It's always been a discussion. What do you want Notre Dame?
And I think that means that Duke or a few others might be there on the table. So it'll be interesting to see. I think at bare minimum, I mean, I could see them. Georgia Tech and Miami would probably be willing to take not take a discount, but at the same time they'd have to find a way to pay their way out of the ACC, and that's the other big portion right there too. Why the Big Ten can't act, because the key matter though is if there's enough Big Ten schools that leave, not Big Ten, ACC schools that leave, like the four, those four that we mentioned for the SEC, the money alone there, when it comes right down to it, there's always going to be lawsuits, but the typical legal rule and remedies, especially in penalties, is you can be no worse, you can be no better off than the remedy cannot render a result that's better than what you would have gotten had nothing happened. Meaning that these schools can't profit off the exit fees out above and beyond what they would have gotten for their TV deal over the next few years. So the real question comes down to is if those four schools leave, and of course Georgia Tech and Miami will be in better off position financially. And if you take four schools and put them in the Big 12, where that's an equivalent financial position, you're really only looking at those 6 or 7 ACC schools left that you would need to make whole in some capacity. So I think that at the end of the day, the exit fees might actually get smaller for the later the schools that depart later, depending on how much money is up front with North Carolina, Florida State, Clemson, and UVA. So I think that's one of the main reasons why the SEC. That's why I think it has to happen first in taking that. And I don't see. People have to realize. I've said this a billion times, Greg. And here's the reality of the politics. The Florida politicians are going to push FSU to the SEC. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. If FSU later achieves AAU status in 5 or 6 years, do you think the University of Florida in Gainesville, which is the god-awful city, Greg, it's a horrible city. Do you think that the University of Florida wants FSU and Miami in the Big Ten Academic Alliance and those connections, with one of them outside the largest metropolitan area in the state and the other outside the power center of the state?
I don't think so.
Yeah, University of Florida's research dollars would get siphoned up so quickly that it would kill its status as the flagship school. There's no way in hell that University of Florida leadership or any other politician in that state is going to allow FSU to go to the Big Ten. They're not. They're just not going to allow that. And they will make the SEC take them. And that's good for ESPN, because ESPN knows that Clemson and FSU bring eyeballs. So a ninth game with those two will bring eyeballs and will make ESPN money, and they'll gladly pay for North Carolina and UVA. And the SEC presidents would love UVA and North Carolina because it gets them into two large populous states with growing markets. And yes, UVA stinks at sports, but it's got a large brand footprint in the state of Virginia. And I think that image is sort of, the SEC is trying to also cultivate its image too academically. I know people don't laugh at that, but it's true. They're trying to. And they've got some good schools in there. The University of Florida and the University of Texas are very, very, very good, solid academic institutions, as well as Missouri and Texas A&M. So, I wouldn't, and UGA is pretty good too. So I would not put that past it. But I think that when it all is said and done, that's what's really moving this. So the SEC presidents, they're going to have to put aside any prejudice they have against FSU and deal with it. And I think, they're also the ones, them and Clemson are the ones willing to pay the check and write the check to start the process rolling.
Yeah.
So, that's really the linchpin that it comes down to. And I think at the end of the day, the Big Ten, I think all they care about is getting Notre Dame. I know that UNC probably feels good to them, but if they didn't get, if they got Notre Dame, if someone said to them, would you be okay if you didn't get UNC if you got Notre Dame? All 18 Big Ten presidents would take that, hands down.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's all I got, Greg.
You got it,
Have a
buddy.
good night, my friend.
Appreciate it. Great call. I don't know what this means, D5 Terps. Motion has passed. I don't know what that means. Let me know. Did I miss something?
From
Rock and Rant.
Rock and Rant, the floor is yours. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing good, but I swear to God, you guys, you're making me like hell freeze over because you're having me have to call in and fight for Florida State honor.
Go ahead.
Everyone. So let's just do this one premise and then I'll go from there. Let's assume the Big Ten gets out of their issues or away from their issues, or Florida State does whatever they need to make the Big Ten happy again, right? Let's do that, because obviously I understand that's a thing.
Yeah.
Two things. Yes, Florida is the central school of the state of Florida and has a big power base and has a legacy. But Florida State is not Virginia Tech or NC State in the state of Florida in terms of influence and power. They're literally in the frigging city where the government runs.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
So this is not like the little sister and Florida can just screw them over completely. Yes, politics play. I'm not going to get into Ron DeSantis or whoever his successor is. I'm not oblivious to that. But everything I hear some people calling in, and a question I have for you is, you're very clear that, hey, the politics are moving for UNC and Virginia towards the Southeastern Conference, including their administration. But the last time we ever got a really good sense of where Florida State's feelings were, it was pretty much screw the SEC and especially ESPN.
Yeah.
And yes, they settled, but do you think they just like chill with that right now? So my question to you is, let's assume there's a world where the Big Ten's happy. Do we know where Florida State's administration is, given that they have a potential choice? Like, you're making it seem, and maybe there's something that I'm missing outside of the Big Ten politics, right? Big thing. You're making it seem like Florida State has no sway in choosing where they go. I think in the past that conversation was, well, there's a gazillion dollars that they're going to have to pay, so SEC, they might not have influence, the ability to avoid it because ESPN will want to keep them there. But now Florida State could buy their way out and not care about, it's not $600 million anymore. So I guess that's my question. Like, when you keep saying, like, I don't think that Greg Sankey's going to let that happen. Well, if the Big Ten wants them, do we even know what Florida State would want, as opposed to just assuming that Greg Sankey's so powerful they can manipulate 3 states at once?
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. If Florida State has let's just presume that I'm correct, which we shouldn't in real life, but let's just, for the sake of the argument, that the SEC is going to take North Carolina, Virginia, Florida State, and Miami, and they're having, let's say we get to the point where they're having these extensive talks, I mean, I don't think Florida State is going to say, wait a second, let me wait for the Big Ten's offer. You know what I'm saying?
That I get. Like, I know they're going to take an offer in the hand. Like, that's like a different thing. But I guess the question is, like, what do they – let's say both people said at the same time, like, swipe left or swipe right. Swipe left for the SEC, swipe right for the Big Ten.
See, so I don't know the answer to that question. But I firmly stand at the position of the Big Ten ain't going to be at the same spot with the SEC and Florida State. Like, I don't think, like, when War Chant came out and said that the Big Ten has initiated talks with the Florida State on realignment, I think they're great people. They do a great job. I just don't happen to believe that's accurate. I don't think the Big Ten has had those talks with Florida State.
Oh yeah. Don't get me wrong. I'm not talking about the people who are regally genetically disposed to lying. And if you know, you know, right? I'm not talking about those kind of things. I literally mean, do we have an idea of what the UNC over the last couple of years have evolved from being pro Big Ten to pro SEC, potentially.
Yes.
And they probably would have a choice based off of everything we know. I'm purely going, do we know what Florida State's preference would be given a timing opportunity of what would they want, right?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Because that affects like the whole, to me that affects what should the Big Ten do and when conversation, right?
I don't agree with you on that.
Why would you not agree?
Because I understand what you're saying, but I don't. Okay, so, and again, this is just this is where PATC stands based upon talks. We could be wrong, Rock and Rant, okay? But we don't think the Big Ten is. They're interested in North Carolina and Notre Dame are their targets. So in other words, I don't think the Big Ten is, how do I say this? For example, if the Big Ten got their number one target, North Carolina and Virginia, I think they'd be done until Notre Dame picks up the phone. Okay?
Of course, I understand that.
So Florida State's not in that. And then if the SEC gets what they want, which is North Carolina, Virginia, and if they don't scoop up Florida State, then they're leaving open Florida State to the Big Ten. So I don't see, and I could end up being wrong, but I don't see a circumstance where Florida State is in the catbird seat with both conferences at the same time, and then we have to have a discussion of where Florida State would rather go. I don't know what the answer to that question is. Right now, I believe that isn't going to be of relevance. You understand what I'm saying?
My question to you, I do, but I think we're acting like everything is in the exact same millisecond. And again, I don't know. I'm just game theorying this out with you. I'm not trying to prove right or wrong, other than the reason why there's certainty is an affirmation of the politics that are going on at UNC and UVA evolving, right?
Yes.
And a certainty that those two schools are connected. And in the recent days, almost as certain guessing as you can do in this space, that UNC and Virginia will go to the Southeastern Conference when it's all said and done, right? And that the Big Ten is coming to realize that. So if Big Ten is coming to realize that, right, then you're thinking that means that Notre Dame's going to know that they're realizing that.
Yeah.
So at that very moment, actually Florida State is potentially in both places available, right? Because the minute people get an idea that those two schools are locked, and they're going to not do the next step after that until they know those two schools are locked. They're not going to go to Florida State and Clemson, just to use the SEC game theory scenario, until they know they're getting North Carolina and and Virginia. In that like time frame right there, that's where, for a moment in time, because the Big Ten now knows their number one target or number two target to Notre Dame is gone. They know that their other target, Notre Dame, is going to have to make a big decision very quickly, because very likely the four biggest schools that they play in football are going to be gone from the conference where they park their other sports. That's like, I guess, my question. I don't know that those circumstances will change, but I hear us talking about like Florida State just like a Forrest Gump feather in the wind blowing with.
I do not know. I would presume that there are factions on both sides of Florida State, right? In regards to that, I do not know, but I don't know if they had a choice. I don't know which way they'd go. That's my answer.
Because a year ago, we probably would have guessed that they wanted. They were so pissed at ESPN,
they go Big Ten,
that they would choose Big Ten.
Yeah.
Now we're saying, well, because things have settled, and hey, maybe there's more of a realization that they weren't the number one team to go, right?
Yeah.
Like Eagles may have been aside. Like, where does that leave them now? Like, how much does everything else? Again, that's 4 steps past the, hey, they have the Big Ten issue, and whether, how can they fix that potentially, and all these other things that have to happen. But I just wonder if it's like the Avengers moment where there's that one moment where Doctor Strange puts his finger up and this is the time, and Florida State has a moment to decide what would they do given that circumstance, even if it's a 1 in 50 chance that plays out. Yeah. Anyway.
All right,
just
man.
a thought.
Beautiful. Thank you, Rock and Rant.
Be good, Greg.
You too,
Take
sir.
Care. Bye.
Mr. Seminole Daniel Gorby says if everything was equal between the SEC and the Big Ten, the Florida administration would prefer the Big Ten. I don't know if Florida State could get a full share, though, without Notre Dame being a part of it. Again,
Call from
Evil Badger.
Evil Badger, can you hold on for a moment?
Yes.
I appreciate it. I kind of look at and we literally have not changed on this since June 15th of last year for a very good reason. But the Big Ten is a little bit more simple. The Big Ten has got 18 members. 2 of those members are in as a half freight, right? Their new media contract is coming up before the SEC. They've got Notre Dame already written into the contract, which elevates everybody. So Notre Dame, for lots of different reasons, is like their number one prime target. North Carolina is the other school that the Big Ten would accept if they could get a deal done. The SEC has made their march on North Carolina, and we believe that Virginia is in the plans. And it's not just us, it's basically every national reporter that's been out there. So for the Big Ten equation, it's a little bit more easier. Now, a lot of people get frustrated with that and say, well, why don't the Big Ten go first? I don't think the Big Ten feels like they need to be honest. They feel that, there are people that really, like, when I say that the walls are closing in on Notre Dame, that's coming from, like, people really believe that. And so if the ACC starts imploding, if North Carolina leaves, a lot of people believe Notre Dame's going to the Big Ten. And so for the Big Ten perspective, which could be right, wrong, could be terrible, but this is their perception, they're gonna try to get North Carolina. They know they're not the chalk. If North Carolina goes to the SEC, if the SEC does the big scoop, and now the Big Ten's gonna probably have Notre Dame in something or possibly something, and that's going to be of incredible high value to the Big Ten. So the Big Ten is more, it's more simple to understand. It's the Southeastern Conference that is the part where is way more complicated. Because the SEC presidents, they want North Carolina and Virginia. That's what they want. And everybody knows that. But what does it take to get those two schools? Are they going to have to bring in a Florida State and a Clemson? Or some other combination? What does that leave the Big Ten? And at this point, I refuse to close any doors because that is what I'm being told. Things are fluid. Things are not cemented. Even though I've been consistent since June 15th of last year, these things are not decided. That's why I would be the most shocked person if we wake up tomorrow, July 2nd. On July 2nd, we heard that this school's going this place, and I don't believe we're even close to that. But it's fluid. We're going to get, I'll leave it at that. Ryan Willie, the Evil Badger, thanks for calling. I appreciate your call, sir. Let it rip.
Thanks for taking the call, Greg.
Well,
right now I should be at the bar celebrating my birthday, but because I went to the Murray Long concert and got still driving my power chair back to my van and got sick.
Oh, sorry to hear that, man. Well, first of all, happy birthday, sir. Congratulations.
Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you. I'll put something out there that I've been thinking about that might throw everything up in the air. What if Notre Dame went to the SEC? And not the Big Ten.
They're not going to the SEC. Their markets, their demographics are not in SEC country. Notre Dame has to play where their people are. Notre Dame is a national brand, and they have Notre Dame people in Chicago. They got Notre Dame people all the way to the West Coast. They got Notre Dame people in the Northeast. The SEC football schedule will not provide, and the other sports would not provide Notre Dame to show their game. It's not in the Notre Dame mark. I do not believe. I should never say never, but I think Notre Dame going to the SEC, there's about a 1% chance of that happening.
Okay.
Yeah. The Big Ten has gone everywhere where Notre Dame would want the Big Ten to go to, right? From Rutgers to Southern California. I mean, it's all laid out there for Notre Dame if they decide to join. But go ahead, sir.
Would they try to keep the ACC together?
What was that?
I just don't understand why they're not already in the Big Ten. And I'm just trying to come up with reasons why.
Because that independence is of great value to Notre Dame. It's worth money. Some boosters are obsessed with that. They would give less if Notre Dame became a Big Ten school. I think Notre Dame would be afraid of being branded as a boring Midwest small private university, and so they have their reasons. But
they're afraid of being so they're basically afraid of being middle of the pack in the Big Ten or any other conference.
I think they are afraid they're going to lose some of their brand value, which I have stated here often. I think that's ridiculous. Notre Dame is Notre Dame even without football independence. I think that is ridiculous. But that's what a lot of them think, so.
Okay, well, that's all I had, Greg. Thanks for taking my call.
Buddy. Appreciate it. Great call, sir.
All right, bye.
from?
Patron.
Patron, thanks for calling, sir. I do appreciate it. The floor is yours.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. How you doing?
Good. How you doing?
I'm all right, man. Hey, so I've had like a number of things on my mind, like actually for a while now regarding like realignment and various different things. So if I ramble a little bit too much, just help me keep on track.
No
If
problem.
you don't mind. So it's interesting. Like Ryan Willie, happy birthday, by the way, just called and like posed a question, like why Notre Dame isn't in the Big Ten. And, you know, the interesting thing is, like, if you go and look at the history back in the old days, like 100 years ago, you know, one of the factors, like, they wanted to join the Big Ten.
Yep.
But one of the factors at that time was, like, you know, a prevailing, like, anti-Catholic sentiment through much of the, you know, Protestant Midwest.
Yep.
Right. You know, it just goes to show how there are other extraneous factors, like social and cultural factors, that impact realignment, whether it's 100 years ago or even today. And so that's kind of like one of the things I wanted to call and talk about, because you kind of mentioned it now, you know, with the whole political situation and this sort of intersection between, you know, the college football and the universities and the political climates, both like state and national and all these type of things. You know, it can be kind of a sensitive topic. But, you know, when a school like North Carolina or, you know, any of these big universities, which are kind of used to like calling the shots in their conference, for example, a school like Texas was in the Big 12, when they go and join a bigger conference like the SEC or USC joining the Big Ten, something like that, you know, it's a trade-off, because you're getting the money to stay above the stratification line, but you're also sacrificing some of your autonomy and your shot calling ability, right? And as you made mention, you know, North Carolina, you know, they kind of call the shots in the ACC, like them and all their little buddies, right? The North Carolina schools, Virginia and them. And you've seen they're really trying to maintain that autonomy with their, you know, interactions with the private equity capital and all that. So if they're going to sacrifice the autonomy once and for all, because you mentioned this is not just a 5-year or a 10-year decision, it's like a 100-year decision, right? You know, there's kind of like no going back. So if you're going to be sacrificing your autonomy, you know, indefinitely, you know, you want to make sure that you're kind of joining a group, you know, like you call like peers, where it's going to be easy to achieve consensus on, you know, potentially controversial, you know, issues, particularly that, you know, might conflict with, you know, your state or local governance, right? You know, an example of this that I would sort of present, your show wasn't around at this time, but I've always wished that you could do an episode on this, is the COVID situation in the Big Ten. Right, where it appears that there was some fragmentation in the Big Ten. Some schools like the Ohio State, Iowa, Nebraska, you know, they wanted to play more. You know, other schools like Michigan, Minnesota, Northwestern, they really weren't interested in playing. Obviously, the division kind of takes place along those political fault lines. You know, so I think it kind of highlights the importance for being able to achieve, you know, sort of a consensus throughout the conference. You know, and so that's something to think about, you know, when you're North Carolina or Florida State, like which conference should I join? Am I going to be forced to do something that either I don't want, you know, we as a university don't want, or the state government doesn't agree with? And one of the situations I thought about, which was like a hypothetical, you know, of course, this is like all controversial stuff because, you know, last year was like election year and all that kind of stuff. You know, but I had thought about this hypothetical situation, and turns out this thing actually kind of happened. If you look at last year in the Mountain West, right? I don't know if you saw this, but like there was an incident where, or, you know, a situation where San Jose State women's volleyball team, they had a transgender athlete. So when the San Jose State women's volleyball team went to go travel, like on the road for the road game, right? Utah State, Boise State, Nevada, they boycotted. They said, like, we don't want to play, like the girls on the team boycotted, and it became a political issue, you know, at the state level. Obviously, in the context of a national election, this was important. You know, it's a national thing now, right? It's like being used as a national political, you know, bargaining tool. And, you know, in contrast, like when the San Jose State team went to Colorado State, okay, there was no issues, right? Because largely there's like political alignment there. You know, and then when they went to Wyoming, Like the girls said, hey, we'll play. The Wyoming, women's volleyball team said we'll play. But then the administration came under pressure because the governor said, no, you can't play because politically this sends the wrong signal.
Yep.
Right. So this is like an example of where like the, political and social and cultural cross currents, that these universities are immersed in can kind of affect the decision making and ultimately the competition, the athletic competition between these teams. And so I had been thinking to myself, like, okay, let's say like North Carolina and Florida State were to join the Big Ten. Well, what would happen then if there's like a transgender athlete from UCLA or Washington or something, and they go and they travel to North Carolina to play? Because, North Carolina had been in the news for the, controversial law that separated the men's and women's facilities, which, was a big national thing. I think MLB pulled the All-Star game from Charlotte because of this. And I think the law still applies to government facilities, like AKA University of North Carolina. Would North Carolina be forced to sort of sacrifice their autonomy? Would there be conflict with the state government, for them having to comply with the Big Ten rules? A similar situation could present with Florida State, right? Where, competition involving the transgender athletes, I think has been, banned currently with the current administration. So what happens if like a Big Ten athlete from, one of these, far, the West Coast or something like that, were to come to Tallahassee? Are they going to be allowed to play? Originally I didn't want to like ever propose something like this because obviously it's like highly politically charged. But, it goes along with something that you mentioned in a previous episode, which is that, the Wisconsin chancellor, the reason that they don't want, they would vote no on Florida State, is not because, the academic status or the lack of a, neurosurgery fellowship or AAU or enough suites in the football stadium. You mentioned that it was because of, the governor's mansion, right? Ron DeSantis in the governor's mansion. The unfortunate reality is that like higher academia, you've talked about it, Greg, these like elite people, they eat at the dinners together. It has become incredibly like politically polarized. And so when you're thinking about the decision making for like the next 100 years, you kind of want to put yourself in a position in a group where you can achieve not just like, regular old football consensus, but consensus on these broader issues, like socio-political issues that affect your university and even kind of tangentially affect like the community around your university, like the sidewalk fans. These schools like North Carolina, Florida State, they got a lot of sidewalk fans that may not have gone to the university. They buy a lot of merchandise. They're part of the brand value. You don't want to alienate them. And, in that sense, like if you join something like the SEC, I mean, the reality is, it's not only, geographically contiguous, but it's also, has a high level of social, cultural, political continuity all the way from Texas to the Chesapeake. So, that's just like one thing that I was kind of thinking of, like it's a factor in the calculation of like, where does a school want to go? Because for a team like Florida State, you may say, well, ESPN spurned them, the SEC ticked them off, but like, that's kind of like a short-term thing, right? If we're talking about like, 100 years down the road sort of thing, it's a little bit more convenient to be in a group of people that are kind of like-minded. It's kind of like a marriage, right? Like if you're going to marry someone, you hope that they're of like a similar cultural, mentality to where like your kids, your grandkids, their cousins, they're all kind of get along type of thing. That was just one thing that I was kind of thinking of. I don't know if you would agree or if that's even relevant.
Yeah, I would agree. And the larger the conferences get, the more difficult it is to find that commonality between everybody because it's very
bingo.
Important. So, the COVID situation had a great effect on the Big Ten that really I've had lots of discussions about with the people I talk with, but has not really been reported out there. I'll give you one example. The Big Ten, they brought in Notre Dame as an affiliate sponsored sports, the men's hockey program. They brought in John Hopkins, men's and women's lacrosse. But the Big Ten was flirting with other possible bringing in affiliated programs. There weren't going to be full members, but they were going to bring in So they were in talks in 2017 and in 2019 with North Dakota men's hockey program. So when COVID hit, the Big Ten was like, it really changed their philosophy. It was like, no, we're not. If we bring in an affiliated program, they have to be of Big Ten stature, of Big Ten level. Because when we make these decisions, they got to be able to accommodate. They got to be rich enough, wealthy enough, whatever it is. They got to be able to pull it off. I remember Arizona State hockey program. They were like, good gracious, what are we going to do with our hockey program? There's a lot of programs that aren't going to be able to work through this. They don't have the money for the testing of COVID, whatever. And they called the Big Ten, and the Big Ten said, okay, we'll set up Arizona State. You can play our Big Ten schools, but you gotta travel and come here for all these games. We're not going there. You are coming here. And Arizona State said, yeah, good, fine. We can fill out a schedule. So even like a COVID had ramifications to the Big Ten, and I'm sure to other conferences that people don't even talk about. Mm-hmm. Yes, you are correct. One of the things that is involved in this next disruption of realignment is the differences between the conferences. There are cultural differences. The Big Ten is different than the SEC. The Big Ten sponsors more sports. It's part of their culture. The SEC sponsors less. They've got a lot of money. They could sponsor more teams, but it's the cultural differences. There's so many differences between the two. And that is the decision, if you have a choice like North Carolina, that is why it is so important. It's why we've covered it so intensively. Before, a lot of people didn't even know what we were talking about, because I had people saying, Greg, why are you spending so much time on what is happening on the ground at North Carolina? This was before Kevin Kesselwich even left, because I said it's important. The SEC forces are marching in, and we're seeing more. We're going to continue to see that because culturally, politically, they've got to be able to have people in position. If they really want North Carolina, Virginia to go to the SEC, which they do, they want to be able to win that internal political fight at North Carolina and Virginia. And this is the process. This is what's been going on. So, but go ahead, sir.
Yeah, makes sense to me. Oh, no, that's all I got, man.
You got it. I appreciate it. Great call, sir.
Have a good one. Yes, sir.
Beautiful. That is absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. Another great call. I want to thank I want to thank those who are donated to this program to help us keep the lights on here. Helmer Hennison, SEC too concentrated. Just taking UNC and UVA might work better. Sure, but I'm of the belief that once the SEC moves, they're going to go for the big scoop. And it's going to be more than UNC and UVA. I could be wrong. And if I'm wrong, then if I'm wrong, then the Big Ten does have choices to make. And it would be almost impossible to pass up on the Florida State Miami. It would be, I think, impossible to pass up on that. Thank you, Helmer Henderson, for the super chat. I appreciate your generosity so much. Greg, would you eat a triple cheeseburger should Florida State go to the Big Ten? No, I'm not going to do that because I've never closed the door on that. But I will stand by what I said on June 15th of 2024. Florida State is not the number one target for the Big Ten or the SEC. Dominoes are going to fall before them, and we'll see what happens. But I think they're going to go to the SEC, and if the SEC don't take them, I don't know how the Big Ten refuses them. I think Kenneth Maynard, the holistic play for the SEC is UNC and Duke for basketball rivalry and make it even more valuable. UVA for demographics and Florida State to shore up football. Interesting, Kenneth Maynard. Very interesting. Who knows? That could be it. That could be the SEC big scoop. It would be hard for them to not take Clemson, and if that would happen, what would the Big Ten do with Clemson? There definitely would be in play. I can, even though they're not really a Big Ten university now, that could be the play, Kenneth Maynard. Could be. Thank you for being an early peak member. 3 months. Holy smokes. 3 months. You are officially knighted, cloak, and dagger. Thank you, Kenneth Maynard. I do much appreciate it. I think I got everything there. I want to thank Ryan, Willie, John Till, Friends Call Me Sean, Helmer Henderson, Curtis, Kenneth Maynard, of course, Kayla Ramirez, Esmus Tox. Thank you guys for your support. I do appreciate it. I thank you all for all the comments in the comments section. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here at Peek Around the Corner. It is July 1st, the first day of Rev Share, the first day of student athletes being paid directly by their athletic department. It is a new era in college sports, and more change is on the way. Today we did the Arizona State Spotlight. I think the Sun Devils are going back to the Big 12 championship game. I think they're going to win, and I think they're going to be a tough out in the playoffs. And we talked about UNC once again. The successor, Mr. Newmark. Boy, it sure does look like he's got an SEC stamped right into his forehead. Continue to put down your comments in the comment section below the video, even after we are off the air. I do read them all. I do appreciate it. If you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to our channel. Hit the subscribe button. Open up those notifications. Turn them on. We can come on and live at any time. Anytime during breaking news. So you got to subscribe and have those notifications turned on. And before you leave, please smash the like button if you've liked our content. I do appreciate it. Until next time, from all of us at PATC to all of you, please, you all take great care of each other. Thank you so very much.